I was here when the cotton campaign announced that it was ending the boycott. It was canceling the boycott on the Uzbek cotton, and it immediately raised questions and speculations that it could be related to the war in Ukraine, that, you know, America was sort of trying to demonstrate that it's going to support Uzbekistan as it expects economic challenges. I saw some Uzbek activists and bloggers and even journalists basically asking questions. Hey, you know, is the end of boycott related to what's happening in Ukraine?
The answer is no, by the way.
Yes, I was just going to add, yeah. So I know that the answer is no, because I mean, we know that this was coming.
Yeah.
That the end of the boycott was being discussed.
Coming.
Yes, it was a long time coming. But how big of a deal is that? And what should the Uzbek government do? I know you don't want to be in the recommending role, but I am sure you must have conversations with the members of the Uzbek government about this. Uzbeks are seeing this as a victory, but at the same time as a historic challenge. Like, can you really now sustain this?
Yeah.
If you claim, or if you conclude that we've ended forced labor and child labor, what would it take for the Uzbek government, for the Uzbek system, for the country in general, to maintain that and make sure that you continue to open and improve?
Yeah, so I'm glad you raised the lifting of the cotton campaign boycott, or the pledge as it was called, because, you know, we lose sight of that kind of event when there's so many other dramatic things happening in the world today and in the region. And it's a shame, because it was a long time coming, and I truly would say that this is a historic development, a historic sign of progress. I think you and I have talked about this before over the years. The U.S. government and a lot of other partners, the International Labor Organization, the German government, the Swiss government, others, have supported now for the past almost 7 years, I think, this annual monitoring of the cotton harvest. And including, by the way, I think importantly, getting Uzbek civil society groups involved in the monitoring, who can now continue to do it, even when the international community maybe no longer has to play that role. And vitally important, we had very strong commitment from the government of Uzbekistan, from the president on down, to eradicate forced labor, child labor and forced labor in the cotton harvest. And after 5, 6, 7, however you want to count it, long years of work, the lifting of this boycott was the result, and it was a historic occasion. Now, that also provides a historic opportunity economically for Uzbekistan, as you mentioned, and there's much we can do to help with that in terms of matching U.S. companies with the market here, convincing them that it's time to come here to source cotton, apparel made from cotton from Uzbekistan. The opportunity is big now, not only because of reorientation that will happen due to the war in Ukraine, but also because, as you may know, there are sanctions against cotton from China, from the Xinjiang area of China, which has been a major source of cotton for the apparel industry for years now. And that means a lot of these companies are looking for a new place. They're looking for a new source. And Uzbekistan is there at the right time. So the timing is good from that perspective. There's a lot of goodwill and a lot of interest in helping. So I actually see this as a huge growth area for Uzbekistan's economy, and we can help.
The obvious question will be where Uzbekistan is in terms of starting its application process or attempt or efforts to join the WTO, and do you see the relevance there as well?
Yeah, I do, because joining WTO is all about having a more open trade regime and having all the laws in place and policies that will allow you to trade with the whole rest of the world and benefit from
And Uzbekistan needs to negotiate with each member of the organization, right?
Right. In addition to agreeing with the whole organization, they need to do these bilateral deals as well. So actually, I mean, there is a connection, with the ending of the boycott. I mean, the boycott didn't end because of Uzbekistan's WTO application, but But again, there's a timing here. There's a convergence of positive things happening at the same time.
So the promise to support Uzbekistan in its bid to join the WTO came from the previous administration, from the Trump administration. So I know that Minister Umar Zakov heard a similar commitment from the Biden administration as well. So can we assume that that commitment is as strong as it was when Wilbur Ross announced it in 2019?
Absolutely, and I was there during this recent visit when Deputy Prime Minister met with our U.S. Trade Representative, Ambassador Catherine Tai, and she uttered those same words.
Unchanged.
Unchanged. Strong, very strong commitment to Uzbekistan becoming a member, to facilitating that, and to helping it. Now, I should add that every country, including the United States, has to do these bilateral negotiations as part of the process. And in those negotiations, we'll be tough and stand up for U.S. interests too. It's got to be reciprocal.
So U.S. is not going to soften its requirements.
Yeah, we're gonna treat Uzbekistan the way we would any other country in the world in terms of, in other words, if you're going to get access to our market, we need access to your market too. It goes both ways. It's two-way trade. That said, I would say we're going above and beyond to help the process. And for example, USAID is providing technical assistance to the Ministry of Investment and Foreign Trade on the accession process. And we have one of our most experienced, I would say preeminent experts on the accession process, a former USTR official. He retired a few years ago, but he used to work there, who is in that role of advisor. And that's invaluable to get that kind of assistance and help. So yeah, the commitment is still there. It didn't change with the new administration.
What happened in Kazakhstan and what's happening, to Ukraine, with Ukraine, really makes everybody think about, reconsider the notion of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. I have to admit that even as a journalist, I have gotten a bit cynical about why the U.S. keeps on mentioning its support of independence and territorial. This is a mantra, right? Like Trinity, Holy Trinity, as previous Assistant Secretary Alice Wells, used to call it. What are the lessons for the United States from these two crises that have direct impact, obviously, on your relations with the region and on the region in general? What are the lessons for you as you continue to support these three things? What has changed for you?
Well, I think one thing that's changed is being able to understand that the unimaginable can become real. And
never say never.
Never say never, because everyone, and I would include people here in Uzbekistan who I spoke to in the government and outside the government, right up to the point where Putin sent his army into Ukraine, did not believe he would. They were absolutely convinced it wasn't possible, because how could he be that crazy? Like,
why would he do that?
Why would he do it? What's his plan? What's his strategy? How is he going to occupy this country? And yet it happened. So I do think that is a lesson to all of us, and it doesn't just apply to this region. I suppose it applies to the whole world, that you have to pay attention to what political leaders say their intentions are and take them seriously. Not to overdraw the historical comparisons, but we learned a little bit about that in the 1920s and 30s with Adolf Hitler, who wrote a book laying out his intentions and his objectives, and then he systematically carried those things out. But right up to the point that he invaded Poland in 1939, many world leaders did not believe he would actually do it, and they thought they had a way to persuade him not to.
Including the Soviet leadership.
Yes, right. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact is Exhibit A. So anyway, that is something that we've been reminded of recently, and I think it should be a lesson for every country in the world. I also think that you mentioned Kazakhstan too. There it's more complex. It's not as clear-cut a situation with respect to sovereignty and independence as the Ukraine one is, but But there, I think the lesson that everyone's drawn, I know that here in Uzbekistan too, is that you need to pay attention to what the public are saying and thinking, and some of the grievances that they have, because it can sometimes, boil up into something that you did not expect and lead to interventions that you didn't expect. In this case, the deployment of the troops of the CSTO. Yes. Actually, the other effect it seems to have had, although I don't know that it took that crisis to make this happen necessarily, is I would say Uzbekistan has redoubled its efforts to build the bilateral relationship with Kazakhstan.
Yes.
And I've heard Uzbek officials repeatedly say that relationship is, in some ways, maybe the most important for Uzbekistan.
We hear that, yes.
And I think that's a great way of looking at it, because it's their neighbor. There's a lot of complementarity. There's a lot in common interests, and so developing trade, developing ties and jobs. I mean, you already have. We were talking about migrant workers earlier. I know that over the last few years, more migrant workers have been going to Kazakhstan rather than Russia.
True.
And again, I think that has some positive elements to it. So, this is Central Asia as a region. And of course, for years we've been working on this through our so-called C5+1 platform to build this sense of regional solidarity and common interests. But it's real. It exists, and the Uzbekistan-Kazakhstan relationship is a good example.
And you support this, obviously.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, we can talk forever and discuss all these issues that are so interconnected in this very comfortable room in sunny Tashkent, finally,
Yeah.
So thank you so much for finding time for us, for having this wonderful discussion with us. We really appreciate it, and I'm sure our viewers are more appreciative of this than anyone. And it's always, they like to hear from you, as we know from social media. I mean, they love it when you speak in Uzbek, but...
No, good, and thank you for this. I always enjoy these conversations, and as I think I said maybe the last time we did an interview, I learn as much from these conversations as I provide information. I learn just as much, so thank you.
Katta rahmat, elchi janoblari.
Marhamat.